The Klan hated Catholics too. This is a threat letter issued by the KKK, datelined Plentywood, Montana, December 16, 1925. And it's telling a Catholic moonshiner that he would be taken out late at night to the nearby Fort Peck Reservation, stripped naked and tarred and feathered. This letter and its supporting documents were submitted to me by a follower to both authenticate and tell him what kind of value he's looking at. But first, let's get a little bit of historical context on why the Klan was so anti-Catholic. Now everybody knows that the Klan's foundation lies in both racism and anti-Semitism, but most people don't know that anti-Catholicism was actually a big part of their start in the 1920s. You see, in 1920, the Volstead Act was passed, which started prohibition in the United States, and the Klan latched onto the narrative that Catholic immigrants were coming into communities and corrupting them by moonshining and bootlegging. And at this point in history, Catholicism was very deeply linked with being an immigrant because the vast majority of Catholics that were being targeted were poor immigrants from all over Europe. And the language the Klan used was very similar to the anti-immigrant rhetoric that you hear today about the Mexicans. The Klan accused these Catholic immigrants of being criminals that were coming in and corrupting white communities, and they cast themselves in the role of protector who was going to be out here all across America protecting good, upstanding Americans that were Protestant from the Catholic menace. And they provided this protection by making threats like this one, or even carrying out the actions that were contained in this letter. But the real question is this a genuine threat letter from the KKK? Let's start by looking at these two supporting documents that came along with the letter. Both of these are injunctions against the recipient, telling him that his business, where he was serving alcohol, was going to be not only prohibited, but it was actually going to be closed down for at least 6 months at a time, and these two injunctions were dated in 1929 and 1932. And they give the business's location as Medicine Lake, Montana, which is a short 25-mile ride away from Plentywood, Montana, where this letter was written. And if you look on the map, you can see that Medicine Lake was on the very edge of the Fort Peck Reservation, meaning that all of the geography that's associated with this letter is perfectly correct because it makes perfect sense that a larger city like Plentywood would have a KKK chapter that would threaten somebody that was in Medicine Lake. The single sheet of notebook paper, as well as being written in pencil, definitely are period correct, but that doesn't really mean anything because you can still buy notebooks like this from the 1920s on eBay today. But the most important aspects of the letter that speak to its genuineness are actually the inconsistencies that are contained within it. First of all, you have this name right here that is badly misspelled. You can see that it bears very little resemblance to the letter that is listed in the injunction, which would make sense if the person only knew how the name was pronounced and not necessarily how it was spelled. You also have this notation right here underneath KKK where it says Ku Klux Klan, which is one of two things. It's either going to be a local nickname that specific chapter used for the KKK, or it could be somebody who was simply not a reader and didn't know exactly how the Ku Klux Klan should have been spelled. But the thing that spoke most loudly to the genuineness of this letter is this date of 1925 right here, because anybody who was forging it to go along with these obviously genuine injunction documents would put it much closer to either that 1929 or 1932 date, because any forger would know that if you had a letter from the KKK that was dated that closely to an injunction that was issued by a government body, it would add greatly to the value of this item. All of these factors make me believe that this is a genuine threat that was received, although there really isn't any way to prove it 100%, and it's also not possible to know if this is actually from a local chapter of the KKK or if a local vigilante was just using that name in order to scare somebody that they didn't like. Now, without those two injunctions, I would be much more leery on saying that this is a genuine letter and would say as a raw item, without those documents, it'd probably be valued around the $25 range, and somebody would have to do an enormous amount of research to determine whether or not it was valid or not. But with those two injunctions included, I would say the entire grouping would probably be around $100 to $150. Thank you so much for submitting it, and I hope this helps.